Well, hello, Philadelphia, and thank you for coming out today for the Women's Upraising, where we want to raise up women's voices. Thank you for joining us to push back loudly, proudly against violence against women and girls. It seeks to silence our voices, stand us down, make us cower, and hide our light. Some of you may know there is an active movement in this country to repeal the 19th Amendment, granting women the right to vote. Is because it is a terrible world for women at present. We are being knocked back, rolled back so fast on our rights. So today is all about ending the silence, no more violence. Women will be free. Say it with me.
Giselle's husband had been drugging her for a decade, inviting dozens of strange men over the years into their home so those men could rape her unconscious body. Giselle pointed out on the stand that they could have reported this with an anonymous phone call, but they never did. Instead, they showed up, followed instructions laid out by Dominique, which featured raping Giselle's unconscious body, and went on with their lives as if they had engaged in a transaction as mundane as buying a used toaster off Craigslist.
The year is 2024, but it feels as if the calendar has rolled back 100 years for women and girls. Each day, women are censored, denigrated, and erased, called bigots for speaking biological truth, and forced to compete against men in our own sports. In this dystopian era, we are even told that a man is a woman if he feels like he is. The history of male violence against women comes in endless forms. Rape as a war crime, sex trafficking and prostitution, on and on and on. Rape kits are severely underfunded here, and the system has made some progress, but many obstacles remain. Is it the new misogyny that has replaced the old? I believe it is. Sisters, what we must remember is this: the next generation of women are watching us.
Right now, a few thousand miles away, girls are being tormented by a practice called breast ironing. If you haven't heard of this, I'm sorry. At the first sign of breast development, large stones, or sometimes a hammer, are heated in scorching rocks and then used to pound on the girl's breasts. It goes on for weeks or months. Their ribs are cracked, their breasts are destroyed, they are covered in burns and blisters. It's torture. Why? This is a quote: to keep dishonor from the family. The adults across Central and Southern Africa agree that destroying a girl's breasts will keep men from raping her. Can I just say, it's not the girls who need to be beaten and burned with hammers. Worse, 16% of the girls did it to themselves in a desperate attempt to delay child marriage. That's a euphemism for her sale to an older man who will own and rape her. This is the fox chewing off its leg to get out of the trap. And this is why notions of consent are wholly inadequate to free women. Some girls are also given binders, which compress the breasts, destroy the tissue, and sometimes crack their ribs. They will spend the rest of their lives in pain. And that is also happening right now in the United States. It doesn't matter what culture or continent. In patriarchy, the female body is shameful and needs to be punished. It's also public property, which makes...
Good afternoon. My name is Irene Lawrence, and I serve on the board of the U.S. chapter of Women's Declaration International, which is a radical feminist organization that exists to advance the Declaration on Women's Sex-Based Rights. Article 8 of the Declaration demands single-sex provisions, including hospital wards, domestic violence shelters, public bathrooms, and prisons, to promote the physical safety, privacy, and dignity of women and girls. The more, quote, progressive among us pride ourselves on seeing the need for incarcerated people to be rehabilitated and not simply punished. But incarcerated women, as a group, are in need of a very different kind of rehabilitation than incarcerated men are. Incarcerated men need to be taught to not act in antisocial ways, to not lash out in anger or violence at people who piss them off. Incarcerated women's crimes more often have to do with being naive, under someone else's influence, and especially traumatized. Their rehabilitation often requires development of better boundaries, self-worth, skills, and freedom from the men who have harmed them. approximately 60 to 70% of incarcerated women or girls have experienced physical or sexual violence in childhood. Approximately 70 to 80% of incarcerated women have reported experiencing intimate partner violence. Women with such histories are then further victimized by the prison system. In April of this year, for example, the Federal Correctional Institute at Dublin, a women's minimum security prison in California, suddenly closed due to sexual abuse of inmates by staff. California's Senate Bill 132 allows incarcerated people to request to be housed in the institution that aligns with their gender identity. Since August 5th, 338 incarcerated men in California have requested to be moved to a women's prison. Here's what some of the women incarcerated with these men have to say about their presence. This is the most malicious way to tell an abused woman what we went through wasn't important. You are sacrificing our safety just to keep a few men quiet.
If the Lesbian, Gay, and Bisexual Alliance USA could summarize our message here today in one sentence, it would be this: we will fight for the dignity and boundaries of lesbians and bisexual women everywhere. At its core, gender ideology perpetuates the lesbophobic idea that a woman's sexual orientation to other women makes her closer to being a man than to being a woman. It makes heterosexuality the standard. Gender ideology targets lesbians by singling out our sex role nonconformity as evidence that we are indeed not women at all. This is false, lesbophobic, and deeply misogynist.
Philadelphia has a long history in the fight for liberation. In 1915, the Pennsylvania suffragettes commissioned a casting of the Justice Bell, a replica of the very Liberty Bell we see before us here today. But this bell had one major difference. The clapper was chained to the side, preventing the bell from ringing, symbolizing the silencing of women's voices. For 5 years, that bell traveled the country, raising awareness of the fight for women's suffrage. It did not ring until 1920, when it returned home to this very square to celebrate the passage of the 19th Amendment. Over 100 years later, women's voices remain silenced in new ways that our foremothers could never imagine, thanks to technology. Women receive rape threats, death threats. The cost is too often that women become afraid. They go silent, anonymous, forced to hide behind fake names and avatars in order to speak the truth about male violence. This silencing of women is not a symptom or a side effect. It is the goal. AI porn, a new threat that's already showing up in our schools, where girls are being digitally undressed and humiliated with sexually degrading content for the whole school to see. And let's not forget the entire industry of regular porn and human trafficking that built the internet in the first place, on the literal backs of women and girls, and still makes up over 30% of content that is transmitted over the web every single day. This digital misogyny is not without real-world harm. Teenage boys and men are radicalized on the internet from the age of 12, if not sooner. They terrorize women on and offline. Elliot Rodger, who killed 6 people in his hate-fueled rampage against a sorority, has become a hero for an entire community of incels online, men who view themselves as entitled to sex from women, violence against women, and silencing of our voices.
Speak out like we are doing here today, right? We have to speak out on violence against women and girls. We want to call out sexual harassment when we see it. For many of us, that's just a daily experience, right? And so we see, harassment or catcalls or things being given to other women, step in, and say, no, that's not okay. Cut that out. We need to be very considerate of our diverse realities as women. Support women's leadership. We need to have women's representation in decision-making spaces. We just have to ensure that the needs of women and girls are front and center. We need into your own hands. Run for office yourself. Be the change. Be the woman that you want to see in leadership in this world. And fund women's organizations. As MK just told you, many women's organizations are being defunded, siloed, deplatformed, silenced.
in decision-making spaces. We have to find a way to make it our government's priorities, whether that's at the city, the state, the national level, or even at the UN. Funding women's rights organizations is key to finding solutions. Call on your government to invest in the collection of data on sex-based violence. And you use that to then push for stronger laws. Violence against women and girls is never justified. It's just never can I get an amen? Is violence against, it's never justified, right? There's never justified. And we need to educate men and boys. We do. We need to educate them on positive masculinity, respectful relationships, and the culture of what is consent, because we need to end rape culture. We just need to end it. And then finally, I want to encourage you, meet with your elected representatives, whether it's the mayor and you talk to them about getting yourself more streetlights to make your community safer, whether it's your police chief, whether it is your state representatives, so you can ask them, can you put some stronger laws on the books, and can the state more fully fund women's rights organizations and women's nonprofits, put more women in office. You have a lot you can do here that, you can take some power and you can turn some things around. Do not let yourself be silenced. End the silence. No more violence. Women will be free. Thank you.